Hello and welcome, I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching The World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top headlines this hour. Victims of Jeffrey Epstein criticised the US government after the release of heavily redacted case files, with some documents and images blacked out or missing. The Justice Department says more records will be released, but survivors say the disclosures offer little transparency or new information. 9 people are killed and 10 wounded when gunmen opened fire at a licensed tavern in Birkastal near Johannesburg in South Africa. Police say multiple suspects fled the scene and a manhunt is underway as investigators work to determine the motive. Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese announces a review of police and intelligence agencies after the Bondi Beach attack is declared a terrorist incident. 15 people were killed in the shooting at a Jewish festival, with police saying the gunmen were inspired by Islamic State ideology. The Kremlin denies that three-way talks between Russia, Ukraine and the United States are being prepared despite diplomatic meetings in Miami. Russian President Vladimir Putin's aide says proposals from Ukraine and Europe do not improve the chances of reaching a long-term peace. The French presidency says it welcomes Russian President Vladimir Putin's readiness to speak with French President Emmanuel Macron. Paris says the terms and format of any talks will be decided in the coming days. Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says Russia is trying to cut Ukraine off from the Black Sea after intensified strikes on port and energy sites. He says the attacks target Odessa and key trade routes as Moscow steps up drone and missile assaults. Israel's Security Cabinet approves the establishment of 19 new settlements in the occupied West Bank, according to an official statement. The decision brings the total number of settlements approved in the past 3 years to 69 and are seen as illegal under international law. The United States intercepts an oil tanker off the coast of Venezuela in international waters, a move that comes just days after US President Donald Trump announced a blockade of all sanctioned oil tankers entering and leaving the country. Those are the headlines of the hour, but we start this bulletin in the Middle East, and fresh violence has been reported despite a ceasefire that came into effect on October the 10th in Gaza. One Palestinian man has reportedly been killed by Israeli forces in what officials describe as the latest violation of the truce. In Gaza City, emergency teams rescued 5 people after the roof of a 3-story building collapsed in the Sheikh Wadwan neighborhood. Meanwhile, Turkey's foreign minister has warned that repeated ceasefire violations by Israel are creating major risks to moving forward with the second phase of the agreement. In the occupied West Bank, Israeli forces killed 2 Palestinians, including a child, during a raid on the Aqabat Jabir refugee camp near Jericho. Residents also reported that 2 young men were severely beaten as Israeli troops stormed their homes, further escalating tensions on the ground. Joining us now is Dr. Emmanuel Navon, an international relations lecturer at Tel Aviv University and senior fellow at the Jerusalem Institute for Strategy and Security. He joins us live from Tel Aviv. Thank you very much, Dr. Navon, for joining us here on NewsX World. Of course, diplomatic efforts continue to reach the second phase of the ceasefire, or at least to get some agreement in how to move forward. Of course, we've seen multiple reported violations by both sides. This singular report of a Palestinian man being killed nears now the 400th person reportedly dead in the Palestinian territory after the ceasefire. What is your hope for the second phase? And do you think it's realistic that we move on to it within the next month, per se?
Well, my hope, first of all, is that Hamas releases the last dead Israeli hostage still held by the terrorist organization in violation of the ceasefire agreement. Only when the last and final hostage, in that case, unfortunately, dead hostage, is sent back to Israel, will be able really to move to the next phase as Hamas committed. As for what you described as the violation of the ceasefire, they are indeed being violated by Hamas with those attempts to cross the demarcation line, the yellow line between the Hamas-controlled area and those controlled by Israel in the Gaza Strip. And therefore, we first have to make sure that Israel's last hostage is being released by Hamas, and that Hamas stop trying to violate the ceasefire by sending its forces beyond the yellow line. Only then will it be possible to really move to the next stage, as spelled out by the peace plan of President Trump.
Yes, Dr. Navon, of course, Ran Gavili, the last body of the hostage, remains in the Gaza Strip. However, 400 or near to 400 people have been reportedly killed in the enclave post October the 10th. Do strikes warrant and the killing of Palestinians inside the Gaza Strip post the ceasefire? Do they warrant the strikes by Israel?
Well, first of all, the figures you're quoting are not verified. Many of them, I believe, are coming from Hamas. So the figure itself needs to be double-checked and verified. But assuming that there is a significant number of victims in those strikes, you have to understand that those strikes are perfectly legitimate and legal. They are directed at Hamas terrorists. Among the victims, it's not clear from what you're saying which ones are terrorists and which ones are civilians. We know since the very beginning of the war that Hamas has been manipulating data, lying to the international media, inflating the number of victims, and trying to blur the line between active terrorists and civilians. As for the Israeli army, it is only targeting military targets and violation of the ceasefire by Hamas in the Gaza Strip. As for the number of victims and who they are, this has to be double-checked and verified.
And Dr. Navon, of course, another update today. Strong statement from Turkey's Foreign Minister, Hakan Fidan, who has publicly warned that repeated Israeli ceasefire violations are creating major risks for moving into this second phase of the peace agreement. Turkey, of course, have been pitched to be a member of this international stabilization force. What's Israel's perspective on who would be the best members for that and who is going to govern the Gaza Strip temporarily in the future stage?
Well, certainly not Turkey, which is currently ruled by an Islamic neo-theocracy. Turkey is an active supporter of Hamas and of the Muslim Brothers, and therefore cannot be a trusted partner in rebuilding the Gaza Strip. And of course, Turkey, being an occupying power in northern Cyprus and in northern Syria, cannot be a credible partner to re-establish order and international law in the Middle East.
Dr. Emmanuel Navon, thank you very much for joining us. It's been a pleasure to talk to you as always. We now move on to our next story, and we move to Europe. And renewed diplomatic efforts emphasize on the European involvement in Ukraine's peace efforts, and it has been signalled. Calls have been made for the broader consultations with European partners following recent talks between US and Ukrainian teams held in Florida. Progress has been described as moving at a rapid pace, with coordination continuing closely with the American side. Diplomatic outreach has also been expanded, with a phone conversation held with Norway's Prime Minister Jonas Gahr Støre. The focus has been placed on aligning positions with key European allies as discussions on a possible path towards peace continue alongside transatlantic engagement. Okay, this comes following a meeting in Miami between two delegations, of course, the Russians and the United States. No avail, however, when it comes to movement forward in peace negotiations. We do have a statement coming out from the Kremlin which has said that these amendments which the Europeans made along with the Ukrainians do not show or push this situation or this conflict anywhere closer to peace. This comes as both sides continue to trade aerial fire, with Ukraine accusing Russia of attempting to block Kyiv from access to the Black Sea. US intelligence came out with a report today stating that Putin's war aims in Ukraine remain unchanged, those original war aims being that Moscow wants to capture the entirety of the country. Okay, now joining us is Major General Gigi Davidi, an international affairs expert and defense analyst. He joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much for joining us. Always a pleasure to talk to you. Let's first have a look at Moscow's stance here. Some would say, given the previous aims and the previous statements coming out of Ukraine in the midst and the height of this war, that Ukraine has now made concessions. It's given up its NATO ambitions. However, what is maintained, especially from the European and Ukrainian point of view, that it wants to have its say on these territorial concessions, something which Moscow seems to believe is completely out of the question. Your thoughts, Major General Davidi, on the fact that Moscow has said that given these concessions, that peace is nowhere nearer?
Well, Thomas, the point is, after all the war, all is about the territory. Why did Russia attack Ukraine? Because of the territory. So the point is that the basic cause of war is the territory gains and the territorial claims. And the point is, after all, Ukraine has fought the war almost for 4 years. What for? To defend its sovereignty, to defend its territorial integrity. Well, if that is compromised, I think then all the sacrifices that the Ukrainians have made, both in terms of blood and treasure, will go waste. And how will the leadership of Ukraine or President Zelensky face his people? So the point is that I think as far as territory is concerned, I don't think Ukraine is going to make any concession, because after all, if Russia wants complete Donbass, but that is not been able to capture in last 4 years, still about 12 to 14% of Donbass territory is being contested by Ukrainians. And the way Ukraine is preparing its defense line all along the 1200 kilometers, it has no mood or it has no intent to give up any territory, because all is being contested. While giving up NATO membership, that is a concession which, as it is, would have been quite agreed to by Ukraine even before the war. But the point is that I don't think territorial bargaining or territorial, giving up territory is almost like surrender, and that is not going to actually happen in any time soon.
Yes.
So my point is that in this case, well, Moscow wants complete Donbass area, but that is not negotiable as far as Ukraine is concerned. And I don't think Ukrainians are going to part with even an inch of territory. So therefore, there's no meeting ground on this. And Ukraine is well within its territorial, integrity. To maintain territorial integrity, it will continue to hold on to whatever it has.
Now, there were reports earlier today that came out that a possible three-way summit was being planned between Ukraine, the United States, and Russia. Zelensky came out in favor of this. However, the Kremlin statements have denied that this is going to happen. Why doesn't Moscow want to get in a room with the Ukrainians and the Americans at the same time?
Well, the point is this, that we have to understand what is the ground position and what is the negotiation conditions. As far as President Trump is concerned, he wants the peace to prevail, cessation of hostilities, and he wants the Ukrainian to give up territory and negotiate a peace agreement. As far as Russia is concerned, they want cessation of hostilities or end to war, provided they are able to get the territory they are claiming. And as far as Ukraine is concerned, I think it's very clear that but for territory, they can negotiate on other issues. And at this time, if President Trump is one-on-one talk with Ukraine, what will the talk lead to? Because there's no meeting ground in talks, and these talks will actually end up nowhere. I mean, there is stalemate altogether. But nonetheless, President Putin is willing to talk with Europe, because Europe as a larger entity is willing to talk, and even Europeans want now to talk with President Putin, because with the negotiators, with the intermediaries, the Ukraine peace process has not come to any conclusive end. And now there is a thought process, and there is also, I think, certain amount of agreement among the Europeans to talk to President Trump directly. Well, that gives a bargaining position. If you sit with Ukrainian and Ukraine doesn't relent, then it's a loss of face for President Putin. So therefore, he like to build ground so that there's some kind of give and take that is possible. But talking directly with Ukrainian, with President Trump and negotiator, it has not as yet yielded any result. And I think President Putin will avoid direct, one-on-one with the Ukrainian president, because that will lead to stalemate, and it will also mean loss of face for President Putin. So he is quite willing to talk to European leaders, and also European leaders also quite willing to talk with President Putin. That may be a step forward and may lead to certain amount of give and take. But I don't think any direct talk between President Putin or President Zelensky is on the mind of President Putin.
And of course, another development in the last 24 hours, we've seen the possibility of a conversation, that's all we know right now, with French President Emmanuel Macron and Russian President Vladimir Putin. Now, there were huge fears from the European side that Europe was going to get cut out of these talks completely. Do you think this agreement from the Kremlin shows that Europe actually does have a little bit of weight in these negotiations?
Oh, definitely, because initially it was the whole process was driven by President Trump. It was seen as a Washington peace process, and President Trump was driving it with his negotiator, that is Witkoff, and his own son-in-law Kushner. But that has not led to any conclusive results. So therefore, even Europe has realized that it is now time for them to get back into the center stage, because Europe willy-nilly was sidelined when President Trump was driving the process. And also, Russian President Putin also has realized that if direct negotiators have not been able to make any headway, it is better to talk to European leaders, because then they can bring certain amount of pressure on Zelensky, because many countries in Europe, they have a feeling that they are not going to shed blood for Ukrainians. So they are also keen that not to get into direct confrontation with Russia, and try to mellow down Zelensky. And if some territorial concessions are to be made, then it's possible that they may put in some pressure on Zelensky to make some territorial compromise, but for the larger gain as far as peace process is concerned. So I think both sides in this new development have something to gain. Europe is back into the game, not sidelined anymore, and perhaps President Putin also sees that there can be certain amount of headway made if Europe puts in some pressure on Zelensky. After all, Zelensky, his strength is only how much Europe backs up or how much America backs up. Without their backing, he has no really local standing or even the military strength to sort of carry the war on. So I think this new development possibly has certain amount of room for maneuver for the agreement or for the ceasefire to go ahead. Thomas.
Okay. Do stay with us. Major General Gigi Davidi, as we move on to our next story and we head over to the Gulf. And Macron has arrived in Abu Dhabi as part of an official visit to the United Arab Emirates, where he will be taking part in a traditional Christmas celebration with French armed forces deployed abroad, underscoring France's commitment to supporting its troops during the holiday season. He will also be highlighting the country's ongoing military and strategic presence in the region, while also reaffirming the strong diplomatic and defence ties between France and the UAE. Meanwhile, Macron has arrived at the Zayed National Museum, where he has been warmly received by his Emirati counterpart, President Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan, marking a symbolic moment for diplomatic engagement and highlighting the strong and evolving strategic partnership between France and the United Arab Emirates. However, the discussions are expected to focus on cultural cooperation, regional stability and future bilateral collaboration. France already has a permanent presence in the United Arab Emirates in regards to its armed forces. And what unique strategic value does Abu Dhabi offer Paris?
Well, Thomas, first and foremost, these ties are historic and they have strategic partnership. And after all, UAE is an important country in the Gulf region, and it also has very strong ties with America. So therefore, it's well, quite rational that these ties are further strengthened because, you know, currently in the Middle East or West Asia, there's a lot of strategic churning that is taking place. And therefore, these big powers like France or America, they will like to maintain their strategic footprint here. And they will not like to yield ground because also, after all, the Chinese and the Russians also trying to fish in the troubled waters. And, you know, Hamas and the Israeli war is on, and the Abraham Accord is also possibly could be strengthened because UAE is part of the Abraham Accord, and other countries may also join in. So the point I'm trying to make is that this visit, though a working visit, though it will have cultural discussion, but it will also strengthen the strategic partnership. And as you rightly brought out, the UAE has a presence of these forces in UAE, and also America has a strong base in the region. And incidentally, that base was hit by the Israelis when they were targeting the Hamas leadership. So the point is, as the new churning is taking place, new alignments are developing, there's give a kind of a contest already on in this region. Saudi Arabia, now Iran are trying to patch up their differences, and Israel is also trying to open out to other countries. And France has as I said, a footprint here, has strategic interest. So this visit will consolidate on what already is there and also explore new avenues, especially in the economic field. Like AI is there, the investment, all these things would be also on the table. But in summary, I can say that this is a visit which consolidates the French partnership with UAE, which is an important country, and also in the larger geostrategic lens or geostrategic focus when we look at the Middle East or the West Asia. Thomas.
Yes, Major General Gigi Davidi, thank you very much for joining us here on NewsX World. It's always a pleasure to get your 2 cents. We now move on and over to the Indo-Pacific, and Australia have wrapped up the Ashes in emphatic fashion, stealing an 82-run win over England on day 5 of the 3rd test to take an unassailable 3-0 lead in the series. Chasing a world record target of 435 at the Adelaide Oval, England battled deep into the 2nd session but were eventually bowled out for 352. Mitchell Starc led the charge with 3 wickets as Australia ground down a stubborn resistance. Scott Boland claimed the final wicket just before tea to end the contest. The result means England have now lost the Ashes in 3 matches for the 4th straight tour of Australia, continuing a dismal run down under. Despite pre-series talk of a genuine contest and hopes around Bazball, England were comprehensively outplayed. Alex Carney was named player of the match, while Travis Head's commanding century earlier in the test laid the foundation for victory. Let's listen in to what both captains had to say following the third test match.
I mean, yeah, it's great. You know, there's so much hype coming into the series, and you never really know how it's going to play out. So, you know, winning 3-0 is hugely satisfying for many reasons, but you know, particularly, I think you know a lot of the you know chat before the series is how evenly poised it's going to be, and you know, to win it in straight sets, it doesn't get much better than that. Absolutely. You know, particularly the amount of work I've had to do to kind of get up to speed in Test match cricket. You just want to play everything now. Boxing Day is a huge test. Sydney's a home ground. You know, huge test. You just want to keep it rolling on, but yeah, probably need to be somewhat pragmatic at times. So, but yeah, you know, we've goal solely on winning this series. So we'll save this for a few days, and no doubt when we get closer to Boxing Day, people start thinking, okay, it would be pretty cool if we can, you know, go up 4-0 and hopefully then in Sydney do it 5-0.
I think there's a lot of stuff that, as a team, as I said at the start of this, that we can actually take forward with us for the remaining games and into the future for other series that we've got. Yeah, so obviously it's pretty an emotional time for me in the dressing room and the guys, you know, players, management, backroom staff. But yeah, when we sort of, you know, get ourselves together and, you know, speak about the game and, you know, what we need to do in the remaining games here, I think we will take a lot out of this game and sort of go, you know, this is how we can, you know, maybe apply ourselves to give us a better chance of being a much more consistent cricket team. And yeah, we've not been able to stand up to what Australia have thrown at us. You know, all the training, all the hours that we've put into, you know, our efforts building up to the series in Australia, even before in Australia, all the hours of, you know, grafting in indoor schools and all that kind of stuff that we do. It's what you do out there that matters the most. And yeah, we've not been able to stand up to the barrage of, you know, execution from Australia.
Google has announced that Google Assistant will be available on smartphone at least until early 2026, delaying its earlier plan to replace legacy chatbot with Gemini by the end of this year. In a blog post, the company said it is adjusting its timeline to ensure a smooth and seamless transition for users. Google added that work to upgrade Assistant users to Gemini on mobile devices will now continue until 2026, with more details to be shared in the coming months. Gemini has been positioned as Assistant's successor late since 2023 and already powers many core features such as answering queries, controlling phone functions and managing smart devices. While Gemini became the default assistant on Android with the Pixel 9 series, Google Assistant has continued to ship on phones with prompts to switch. The move comes as Google pushes Gemini across products to compete in the AI race led by ChatGPT. Well, that's all that we have time for this hour. Keep watching NewsX World for more international updates.